Hello. At this point, it may be useful to go through three major approaches that are commonly used by language teachers. These are presentation, practice, and production, PPP method, task-based learning, the lexical approach. So let's start with PPP. The PPP approach is the most common methodology and follows a sequence of presentation of the target language, practice, and production. We won't go into the details of each stage here, but we can emphasize the main elements of each stage. The importance of presenting by memorable and realistic examples that have logical connection to the next stage. The practice stage focuses on form and must be clear and understandable to make it attractive to students so that they can get confident when they practice it. The production stage centers on fluency, providing an opportunity to interact in communicative activities. In this stage, the students are expected to demonstrate their learning by working and sharing with each other. However, there are some arguments against PPP. One of them is that some people claim learners may do the task without using the target form at all. Another argument is learners tend to overuse the target language in an unnatural conversation. Another important claim is learners can produce the target language in a controlled classroom setting, but they cannot utter them accurately outside. Although there are so many discussions, we are talking about meaningful contexts and dialogues, repetition, matching the activity types during the practice stage, and the production stage in freer context like role plays or communicative tasks. They all seem to be relevant for our purposes as long as there is meaning, cognitive involvement, and affective depth. Let's continue with the next one, TBL, task-based learning. TBL, on the other hand, is claimed to be genuinely free of language control, which causes the learners to rely on their linguistic resources. So it is argued that this kind of task applies, therefore, language is used for a genuine purpose. In this approach, the aim is to achieve the task. Hence, it allows free exchange of ideas considering appropriateness and accuracy of language, rather than the production of a single idea. And during the task, there is a lot of teacher talk and exposure to the language throughout these stages. After learners do the task, there may be a language focus and practice. But the most important thing here is the instruction can be done at any stage. It can be spontaneous as needed or planned. A sample framework can be useful. You can also find it in your work area, session 4. It may give you a better idea, especially about beginning stages, the tasks for beginners. So, for example, one task we will look at has this task cycle. So as a pre-task, the students are introduced to the topic and task. There is lots of teacher talk, as we said before, and there may be lots of use of pictures or songs, demonstrations, any kind of material that teacher needs. Then the task cycle includes sets of short tasks followed by lots of teacher chat about the tasks and the planning and reporting. And language focus may come either after the task or throughout the task spontaneously when there is a need. But there can be further practice and repetition or recycling. Here, Willis and Wesley suggested different kinds of tasks. For example, making a list of words that you know, or true or false statements. Here, there are other task types you can see: classifying, sequencing, identifying, and memory games are a part of this. Most tasks are similar to the practice tasks we will be using. As you see, problem solving mainly includes cognitive depth in vocabulary teaching. So here, there is some kind of deep thinking involved. Okay, students need to find something or solve a problem. These are just a couple of examples. We can just move to the lexical approach. It is impossible to talk about vocabulary teaching without mentioning Lewis' 1993. It is hard to summarize what the lexical approach offers in such a small part, and We will have a whole session on it later, but let's look at some of the basic aspects of it. Lexical approach of language learning focuses more on combinations of words or phrases as language chunks, in contrast with groups of parts of speech following certain formulas. In this sense, it's an alternative to traditional grammatical approaches. The lexical approach states that language acquisition happens through acquiring the chunks or collocations of a language. Language is not about rules, but rather about acquiring enough examples for the learner to make generalizations. Lewis, 1993, suggested that being able to use a word involves mastering its collocational range of restrictions on that range. For this reason, using all the opportunities to teach chunks rather than isolated words is quite important for vocabulary practice. What are some teacher roles here, and how are chunks learned? So, first of all, let's answer this question: how are chunks learned? Exposure is the key word here. Seeing it over and over again and making a generalization is the main point, as we mentioned before. There is comparison element, comparing the target language chunk with chunks of mother tongue and noticing a combination. So this requires lots of training actually. Here, maybe it's useful to say that identifying chunks may be difficult for learners, especially at lower levels. So this can be given more emphasis at lower levels. So awareness raising and identification tasks can be highlighted, but from intermediate level and onwards, increasing collocational competence can be more important. Lewis also suggested that advanced learners can build on what they already know by using better strategies and increasing the number of items they meet outside the classroom. For him, learners need to master collocational range and restrictions of a word or phrase to be able to use it fluently. How can this be done, and what are the roles of teachers and learners? The teachers can provide an environment for the learners to manage their own learning through awareness-raising activities, identification of chunks, and retelling, starting from lower levels onwards. And what are the learners' roles? To use a concordancer, an online resource that provides various usages of a word or a chunk. They are also discoverers, observing, classifying, and making generalizations. We have already talked about cognitive and affective depth chart a little. We said cognitive and affective demand or engagement are very important for long-term memory. So let's look at the bases once more before we continue with the rest. So here, the suggestion is the more decisions the learner makes about a word and the more cognitively demanding these decisions are, the better the word is learned. And also, the words that trigger a strong emotional response are more easily recalled because affective or emotional information is kept in memory along with cognitive or intellectual data. We remember everything from these approaches, and also motivation. Simply, the desire to learn new words for exam purposes or academic studies may not guarantee that words will be remembered. Creating a strong motivation may result in spending more time on rehearsal and practice and enjoying the practice activities, which may have a stronger effect on long-term memory. But it is claimed that even unmotivated learners remember words when there are set tasks that require them to make decisions about the target vocabulary. And at this point, I'd like to remind you the university students or EAP context. We need to remember long word lists that the learner needs to learn in these contexts. And how can we incorporate cognitive depth, affective involvement, and motivation in all these? And is it possible to include all of them in practice activities? Try to exploit different ways of creating these conditions and finding a way to incorporate online resources and tools so that learners can be motivated cognitively and emotionally and improve strategies to become independent learners to improve their mental lexicon.